And we have some good speakers. We're going to try to keep everything on time here today. I have a task, and whoever is going to deal with the Senate Bill 411, 401, 402, 403 is also going to have a task, because this is basically rewriting the entire election laws, and it's a huge undertaking to plow through this thing. So I'm going to try to hit some of the highlights so that you know this 603 and 4 are a complete alteration of the current landscape of how you do particularly a recount here in the state of Michigan. I hear the Democrats say, oh, it's just a little tweaking here, a little tweaking this, not a little tweaking. It is a complete rewriting, and in my view is eliminating, eviscerating some of the very important rights the boards of canvassers have to be able to say, well, there's an irregularity here, there is something wrong here, we need to take a look at that. They currently have investigatory and also subpoena powers in the current law. All of that is going to be taken away. We had a huge issue back in the 2016 election when it was brought to the Board of Canvassers for the recount, and I believe the number was 72% of the precincts couldn't be recounted. And so we gave them some more time and money to get all this fixed. And so from 2016 to 2020, when there was another recount with Jill Stein, they found out they couldn't recount, I believe it was 79% of the precincts. So the boards of canvassers says, what is going on here? Busted open the ballot boxes, numbers that aren't matching. We want to take a look at this. And there was a tsunami of death threats. You hear these clerks talk about threats, and some of them have had, but I have never heard of anyone they had to go deal with, I forget her name, Monica, that is a board of canvasser. They doxed her daughter. They said this is where she goes to school. This one woman sent her bloody, tortured pictures of a girl the age of her daughter, said this is what we're going to do to you. Virtually nothing happened to that woman. 4 years later, she got like a week suspended sentence for this horrific behavior. So they wanted to find out what was going on with this unbelievable number of precincts that couldn't be counted. So it's very real what happens with the Board of Canvassers. Their current powers are going to be taken away. And I'll go through this as quickly as I can because there's other speakers as well, but I'll try to just hit the highlights. And again, this is a very small part of the overall bill. But under current law, recounts of votes can be done based on an allegation of fraud or mistake. The bill removes fraud as a reason, but goes further in stating that the recount petitions may only allege an error, and requires that the petitions be based on an allegation that without that error, there would have been a different outcome in the election. Furthermore, in the bill, a recount could not be an investigation or audit or conduct of the election, and the recount could not access the qualifications of the voters participating in an election or in the manner in which the ballots are applied for or issued to voters. So even if there's all kinds of issues that they see in terms of, is this a qualified voter? How were these ballots issued? If they see all kinds of things, if statements are given to them, they no longer will be able to deal with any of that. This really is strangling their ability to go after this alleged fraud. As I talked about in the Detroit election, they had grave concerns that still has not been rectified. Generally, precincts are deemed unrecountable if the numbers are unbalanced or because the containers are not properly sealed. Now they will be able to still recount those even if those are not properly sealed and if the numbers don't match, as long as there's some reasonable explanation. Well, how is it in Detroit in particular, years, cycle after cycle after cycle after cycle, the same thing's happening, and we give them more money, and the same thing continues to happen? How can it be that it's just lack of training if this is just an ongoing problem, particularly in one venue? The bill strikes the statement for fraudulent or illegal voting or tampering with the ballot or ballot boxes before a recount by the County Board of Canvassers. So you can no longer investigate that. You can only call it an error And you're not able to investigate any of these good faith allegations that there was fraud in the election. So that is one component of the bill. The bill also limits the time frame that you can start the process and finish the process of the recount, again, making it more difficult to do the recount process. They also are doubling the fees from, in most cases, it'll be from 250 a precinct up to 500 a precinct. And I was just talking with the current, or the former Secretary of State. She said, we have been upping these fees all along the way to stay current. Well, now they're doubling these fees. They also have a new provision that instead of it being just a potential fee on the voting day and maybe the absentee, they're also doing a third charge for early voting. So now if it's 500 from 250 and increasing the number of fees per precinct, you'd be paying 500 on voting day, 500 on the absentee, and 500 on the early voting. So $1,500 per precinct. You can see what they're doing here is attempting to make it very, very difficult in order to do a recount. And when you do a recount, you have very, very little opportunity to really do an investigation. Their big thing that they gave is they said, okay, well, if the Board of Canvassers do see a problem, they can refer it over to the AG or to the local prosecutor. Yeah. Oh yeah. That's really going to be investigated. So they moved the date that you must complete a canvass and announce a determination, moved from 20th day in the current situation to 13th day. Again, you can see how they're trying to constrain the amount of time that you have to do this recount. They also say that if there's interference with the recount, the old bill said a current officer, assistant, clerk, employee engaged in conduct in a recount who willfully commits an act which interferes with a fair and impartial count of the votes cast in a contested election must be deemed guilty of a felony. That throws it open to any individual. So it's not specifically somebody working there, not somebody who's an employee. It is any person. Now, what does that mean? If you're walking in front of somebody carrying a box and the box falls, did you just commit a felony? This is the kind of problem you have when bills are not crafted with the thought of unintended consequences, or maybe the intended consequences. We're not sure. So we talked about the increase of the fees, how difficult it's going to be to carry out. And basically, they're stricken from the current language, almost all of the ability to have subpoena power, have the election material brought in before the committee. All of these things are being knocked out of the current practice. There's so much more to this, but we have other speakers. I don't have time to get into it any further than I have. But already we're seeing with one of the bills that will be talked about, 401, that is going to be so difficult for our clerks to be able to even stay in the job. So many clerks said, if this passes, I'm resigning. It is so draconian. They said it's just codifying the National Voting Rights Act. That is not the case. It is all kinds of things where the clerks be sued if they don't get equal outcomes of different groups and voting patterns. So this is the kind of thing that we're dealing with in the legislature, and we need your help to be your voice, our voice, out there in the community. Talk to the media, write letters to the editor, get people out there to understand whether you're an independent, Democrat, or Republican. This doesn't help you. This kind of stuff is crafted to get an outcome for the people who are not transparent. So every single person in this state who cares about election integrity should be screaming, this is absolutely done. Here in Lansing, hardly any coverage have I seen of these huge rewritings of the election bills. Virtually nothing have I seen in the media. It's like we have to be the voice. We have to be the ones telling people because they are not doing it. So we have some other speakers I would like to get to. I appreciate so much everybody being here. We hope to have some time at the end for a little Q&A. And with that, I would like to bring up Senator Ruth Johnson, who needs to talk about what is happening with our current voting rolls and how they need to be cleaned up. Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Jim. I really miss being Secretary of State. You cannot imagine how much. But Jim, I want to thank you for putting this on. I think it's good for everyone to get what is actually happened, where we really are at, and then get a plan on what to do. I want to thank each one of you. I know you came in this bad weather because you care. Because we don't want to see anybody be able to take advantage of a system that's flawed. And I guess that's one of my biggest concerns, but I do want to thank each of you for being here. You've taken time out of your day, and I know the weather, we're supposed to get some hail, so hopefully you've brought your umbrellas. I just really want to echo Jim Runstead's concerns. He's been so good to work with in the Senate for me. And these are some of the worst bills I've seen during my years in the legislature. To strip away protections that have been in our laws for 60, 70 years, to say you can't even look at fraud or wrongdoing, and to gut the authority of our state's bipartisan county board of canvassers is just very, very troubling. Unfortunately, it's part of the theme, and we've seen from the far left interest groups and the Democratic governor, current Secretary of State, and legislature here in our state. Methodically, they're stripping away layer after layer of integrity in our elections, both by laws that are being passed through and by some of the past ballot initiatives that were very deceptive, and a lot of money was spent to make people think some of it was different than what it really was. So here it is. Right now, well, as of last week, 104.9% of the eligible electorate are registered to vote in the state of Michigan. That's 104.9. I'm not good at math, but I know that's not good. So it is alarming, really, to have that many. When I was Secretary of State, we made it a priority to clean up the qualified voter file the day I walked into office. I knew that is the foundation of the integrity of our elections. So I went to work. I took off 642,000 people who were dead. Never good to have dead people on the voter rolls. 149,453 who had moved out of the state, and 3,505 non-citizens. Unfortunately, this Secretary of State has gone the opposite way. The rolls have gotten bloated with individuals who are simply not qualified to vote in our state. Clean and accurate voter rolls are the foundation of integrity in our elections. And it's even more important today because Michigan now requires no photo ID. No photo ID. Even though 80% of us, including Democrats, Independents, and Republicans, all believe in photo ID, the majority of every party. But that's been stripped out. Millions of dollars were put into TV ads. It looked, oh, so credible when the guy goes, and Proposition 2 will enshrine voter ID into our Constitution. But he failed to tell you in their 5,000 some word ballot initiative, it also added, or none. And so people were told this, that the commercials, the ads, the mailings, they were all so deceptive. And, you know, one thing, you can go toe-to-toe on anything you want to fight with, but you shouldn't deceive people. You're just using them when you do that. People need to have a say. This is America. I found it every time I would watch it, and boy, did they play it a lot on prime time in Southeast Michigan, over and over and over. It was very well done, too. So right now, we have no system that can tell you if somebody voted in multiple states. None. So Michigan's current Secretary of State, she failed to remove 177,000 names of people who no longer live in our state from our voting rolls, but not until she was sued. And then after this, she already had sent out pre-filled out absentee ballot applications, I call them invitations to vote, to 800,000 people that were not qualified to vote. The current Secretary of State also was found by a court to have violated the Administrative Procedures Act. She stripped away the standards for signature verification on absentee ballots. The Secretary of State has had a history of ignoring rulemaking requirements that include holding public hearings to get feedback on her proposed rules, as well as taking proposed rules through what we call JCAR, the Joint Committee Administrative Rules. That's a bipartisan group. And so it's the House and the Senate. It gives transparency. It lets you as citizens know what's happening. Nope, it's gone. She doesn't like to do that. So she has helped this process of stripping away layers of standards, and it really is not good for our future of democracy. I don't see how any of those things make it any easier for anyone to vote. I just think that it has stripped what we really need in the law so that you all can be assured after an election, win or lose, about half of us are going to lose, you need to be assured that it was done right. It's just basics. So now the Democrats in the Senate have passed bills 603 and 604 on a complete party line vote. They say you can't even look at whether there's been any kind of misconduct in an election. And these bills now sit on the floor waiting to be voted on in the House of Representatives. They simply should not become law. There's another set of bills, 401, Senate Bill 404, that are very concerning to me too. These bills are currently in committee too. They would put enormous new burdens on our local units of government and on our clerks, and it would create a huge bureaucracy under the Secretary of State, which would basically exist to help people sue local governments, our clerks. These bills would cost taxpayers millions of dollars and create new obstacles for our clerks that really are unnecessary. We have some of the best local clerks that conduct elections in the state of Michigan. We have a great system that's being torn apart piece by piece. So I would urge everyone here to write, call, contact somehow your state representatives and oppose Senate Bill 603 and 604. What you think, and every time you contact a legislator, you count for 1,000. Because 999 people are sitting on their Barco lounger with their TV complaining, or they're changing the channel. So when you write, we know there's 999 more people that feel the way you do. So make sure you realize that you have great strength as citizen activists. I also want everyone to contact your congressperson to support a bill at the federal level, and it's called H.R. 2566. It's been introduced by Lisa McLean. This bill, also known as Voter Registration Efficiency Act, is something I first worked on with, some of you remember, Candace Miller used to be the Secretary of State. She went to Congress, she chaired the committee, and I told her the problem is, if one of us moved to Florida, we surrender our driver's license and get a new one, but we don't surrender our voter registration card. It should be done at the same time you change your address. Simple, easy. But she has not been able to get it through, and neither could Candace. We need help. This is common sense. It's not the least bit partisan. We shouldn't have 104.9% of the people registered. You shouldn't have bloated voter rolls. And this, at the DMVs, most people call them, we call them branch offices in Michigan, but this is 2 buttons you push. I surrendered my driver's license, and I got a driver's license in a different state, and then the same with the voter registration. That's what should be done, but it's not being done. So it's common sense. Again, it's H.R. 2566. Could use all the help we can get in trying to get that through. If people are registered in more than one state, and I did have that happen when I was Secretary of State, we have nothing within the system to catch it, 0. That's not good policy. With same-day registration, We had over 20,000 people register without photo ID and vote in the last 2 weeks. We have no way to check that. There is no real-time computer. These are things that just one by one cause problems. So please, please, I'm asking you, I know you've taken a lot of time to do this, but please keep fighting for integrity. Please keep fighting to make sure that when we vote, we know that it counted and it counted right and nobody's disenfranchised because somebody else voted that shouldn't. So thank you so much again for coming and have a safe trip home. And thanks to Jim.
Thank you, Ruth. And now I'd like to invite up Senator Jonathan Lindsay, who is going to talk to us a little bit about some great information you need to know on a current ongoing lawsuit.
Thank you, Senator Renstead.
Yes.
Thank you all for being here. I'm going to situate my face. Thank you all for being here.
Plugged it. Yeah, plugged it. You got it. You got it.
Thank you all for being here. Should I just yell? Is it going now? No. I'll just speak up. Thank you all for being here. Thank you again, Senator Runstead, for putting this together and for everybody that was involved. For anybody I haven't met, I'm State Senator Jonathan Lindsay. I serve in Southwest and South Central Michigan. I am going to talk to you, Senator Runstead, a little bit about a lawsuit. When I get there, I'm afraid people start to fall a little bit asleep. So I'm going to make some general comments first. You know, how many times have we heard it said over and over that the 2020 election was the most secure election in American history?
It was.
And this is crazy. And we see every story when we try to just take a common sense approach to talk about some of the problems in our system. We see every media article that's written by the mainstream media has a caveat in it. By the way, there is no evidence of widespread election fraud, right? As though they need to tell us over and over that even having a conversation about this is inappropriate. And I think the intellectual laziness on these points is astounding. Because let's just take a step back and think about human nature and how things work. I think anytime you open the door and leave a possibility for people to cheat, especially in important things, some subset of people are going to do that, right? Now, what about if the stakes that are on the line are controlling trillions of dollars of spending in the most powerful military on earth? Who in their right mind thinks that there aren't going to be actors out there that will do everything in their power to get hands on that, right? And I say this, it's just common sense. Most American people, most people in Michigan understand that, and that is the root of why there is such a call to say that those people who are writing election law and who are administering elections have a very high obligation to think about how do we protect those systems. Our attitude needs to focus towards saying everything that we do needs to go through a lens of saying how could this be exploited, how can we fix it? But we don't just have to think about it hypothetically. We can think about recent history. What do our elections in America look like? In 2012, the Obama administration was having a massive backslide in the polls. They were underwater. They had done some deeply unpopular things. The American people were rising up. They were upset with them. And they were very worried about the potential election outcomes in 2012. So what did they do? The federal government of the United States weaponized the IRS against its political opponents in that election season. This is not speculation. At the time, everybody who said it was accused of being a conspiracy theorist and everything. Give it a few years, and the IRS had to go on record and apologize to the people for what they did in targeting their political opponents during an election year. So fast forward, 2016, what happens? Again, we see President Obama is still in office. He used parts of his administration, worked with the candidate of his party, including incredibly powerful entities like the intelligence community, worked with a candidate for president to engineer false narratives about Russian collusion. Everybody remembers the Russian collusion hoax, to try to damage Donald Trump's election outcomes that year, right? And we had to live through that for years and years of the Russia hoax. 2020, again, we got to skip over that one. That was the most secure election in history, right? Nothing bad happened then. But here we are in 2024, and now we see at a national level a political situation where people have done things like run for positions in government specifically so that they can go out and prosecute Donald Trump. And that's what's happening, and we watch right now, right? So they bring down an unsurprising conviction in a deeply flawed and unfair process. Again, these people are willing to put their thumb on the scale any way they have to get it done. But the problem is, you know, while they might be comfortable stretching the law, breaking the law, even doing outright fraudulent things, what's better than that is to codify the ability to manipulate elections within the law. And that's a lot of what we've already heard about today, is you make the door wide enough, you make it impossible to detect the problems in the system, you can make, you know, a very clear path that is a low liability for them to pull off the outcomes they want in elections. So one of the cornerstones of that in Michigan is an effort that the Democrats led, primarily Democrats led, in 2018 and then in 2022 to change Michigan's constitution to set standards for how election law can be written in the state. So this is like the superstructure that we have to work within to say, if we even want to pick up the topic in the legislature of passing a law, of changing the election code, we have to look at the Constitution first and say, what does it say there? So they went to the Constitution and they, through, as Senator Johnson pointed out, highly deceptive methods, they got a few ballot initiatives passed that now create a situation where we in the legislature have to fight against a system where they've tried to put handcuffs on us. So what are the examples? Again, Senator Johnson talked about voter ID. If we in the Michigan legislature right now want to put forward a true voter ID law that suggests that people actually have to prove who they are with photo ID when they vote, we will immediately run into a roadblock of the fact that the Michigan Constitution prohibits such a law right now, right? So this is why, to get to the point of why I'm supposed to be up here, this is why Senator Runstead, myself, Representative Smith, several other people in the legislature last year brought forward, Representative DeSanto's in the back, I don't know if any of the other plaintiffs are here, we brought forward a federal lawsuit challenging both of those proposals that modified Michigan's constitution, both the proposal from 2018 and from 2022. And the reason we challenged them is not just because we don't like them, is because we believe, and we dug into this and said that they were not passed through a process that conforms with the federal constitution requirements of how election laws are supposed to be set. And so what I'm talking about there is Article 1, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution. It's called the Elections Clause. It stipulates that it's up to the state legislatures, it's our responsibility to set the time, place, and manner of federal elections, of course within the framework of, you know, the U.S. Congress can weigh in and set rules about it as well. That is not what happened when these ballot initiatives were passed. There are plenty of options for people in the state of Michigan if they want to change the Constitution, to involve the legislature in it. Our Article 12 in the Michigan Constitution allows for this, but that's not what was done. So we took this to court. Going to court is a long process. One of our, part of our legal team, Mr. Coleman's here. Other people that are involved, Patrice, who I think we'll hear from later, has been involved. It's a long process. It takes a lot of people, and it requires a level of perseverance. Our first round in court, we had a lot of people who could have been ultimately adjudicating the case. I think we got a judge who was appointed by by Biden, one of the only ones there that could have taken up the case. And so, of course, she comes out and says, you don't even have standing to be in my court, get lost. So the last thing that's happened is we, of course, have appealed that, and we will continue to fight. And everybody that I've talked to that's on it, Senator Runstead, all the representatives, we are committed to fighting the fight all the way through the Supreme Court if we have to. We'll go there twice if we need to. And the reason is we need to take these deeply flawed measures out of Michigan's Constitution if we want to even have a chance of getting back to having election laws in Michigan that lead to an outcome where the will of the people is the same as what we see in people actually getting elected. And that's a critical thing that I think is missing right now. So the last thing I want to say is that, fighting these types of legal battles is both about what I just described, is getting us in a place where the legal framework allows for clean elections, but it's also deeply important, in my opinion, that our elected officials and people who are involved in, I didn't say Representative Maddox is one of our plaintiffs as well, right? The people who are involved in these elections need to step into this fight. We can talk all day about political issues that we're passionate about. A lot of people here might have a particular issue you're passionate about. I got first involved talking about taxes, right? Like I'm a nut to talk about taxes. But none of that matters. None of it matters if we don't get to a place where our elections are actually fair, clean, where the will of the people is directing the outcomes of who ends up representing them. So once again, thank you all for being here, and thanks for those who put it together. Thanks for having me.
Not everyone may have the booming voice that John has. Okay, well, just got to forego that. Well, while he thinks he's got some, resume taping. Okay, I'd like to invite up Representative Smith, who will speak on her experience as the Vice Chair of the House Elections Committee.
Well, thank you. Thank you again for all the help in organizing this. This is just very important. And I'll just use my mom voice. I got 3 boys and a husband who struggles to listen sometimes. So I'm State Representative Rochelle Smith and also the Vice Chair of Elections. And I am a freshman. This is my first term here. I was a former township clerk in Martin, which is south. I represent the 43rd District, Southwest Michigan. Covers 4 counties, mostly Allegan, portion of Barry, township in Eaton, and not even a full township in Ottawa. So we have no more gerrymandering though, right? No. Yeah. But, you know, we are here today and to just address so many concerns in our election process. And the last 18 months that we have been here, the amount of election laws that have been passed is detrimental. It has completely changed our system, and some things we can't control because of Prop 2 within that, what constitutionally what needs to be done, but in my opinion, so much of this is so broadened and expanded to just, it opens up the doors. And as a former clerk, I can see how bad of a path this is for our state. This should concern every Michigan voter of the recent legislation that has been passed. These bills remove common sense, they end checks and balances, and they are extremely broad. You would think that of the 4 Republican former clerks in the legislature, we've got 2 former county clerks, 2 former township clerks, currently serving over 30 years combined experience, that we would have been brought in to the help implementation of Proposal 2. They had a seat at the table with how vast and drastic we're changing this. We were not only not at all a part of any of that, but we were completely shut out. That should tell you something as well that's concerning. Nothing about this has been bipartisan, nothing. We've expanded Proposal 2 far beyond what the constitutional text said, allowing early voting for up to 29 days. It's not just 9 days that most people think. It's actually some areas and jurisdictions can do it for 29 days. They just choose. Removing challenge ballots, allowing third parties to fund our elections, such as Zuckerbucks, and that's not going to go away. We've just codified that all into, fund our elections, outside groups. We're going to see more and more of that. This legislature legalized paid rides to the polls, and so much more just to get the vote out. These are going to be coerced votes that will lead to fraud. I'm convinced all of this is being done because the Democrats have a hard time winning otherwise. Yep.
It's true.
If we have had the most safe and secure election that we've heard time and time again, the last couple election cycles that we've had, then why are we doing all of the need to have these extreme laws be enacted that significantly weaken the security and integrity of our votes? Meanwhile, our voting rolls are just inflated more than ever, as Senator Johnson has expressed. It was up from the last time. I thought it was like 104.5. Now we're nearly at 105. The Democrats continue to introduce legislation to strip away safeguards to provide checks and balances that protect our votes. Michigan voters deserve confidence in our elections, and I think it's safe to say that we aren't confident at all in this. I'm grateful for people that have showed up today. We need to get the word out there of what's going on, and my hope is that one day when the Republicans do get back in control, we can repeal some of these egregious laws that are recently put on the books, revisit those and know what we can change that's not enacted in part of the constitutional portion of Proposal 2, and start with cleaning and maintaining our voter rolls. I think we can repeat that more and more again because that's a huge problem here. Requiring a valid ID and upholding accountability. You know, our current Secretary of State's office clearly doesn't have that at all, and we need to change that. I'm honored to serve here with so many fighters that actually are passionate about elections. So thank you so very much. Keep fighting the good fight. We are here. Contact us, and we will just keep doing what we can to protect the vote here in Michigan. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to invite up Representative Ann Boleyn. Here she is, going to talk about her elections experience. She's got a vast background in elections.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you. It's so good to be here, and most of all, it's really good to be joined in the legislature with fellow clerks with Rochelle and also Rep. Boyer, and of course, former Secretary of State Senator Johnson. I can tell you as a legislator, it has really profoundly helped me, especially with everything that's going on with elections. But we know that public trust and public confidence is at an all-time low. Not just how we cast our votes, how the government spends your money, just all facets. This is not misinformation or disinformation. This is the truth. People have lost confidence in those that serve them. I think we are like-minded, and I do believe I am here to serve the public, the people who sent me here to be their voice. As a former clerk, I was also, so many of you will recall, I was the chair of the House Elections and Ethics Committee last term in a very important time in our history. And I feel, you know, as a former clerk, I went through a lot of changes. I was a clerk for a very long time. I went through the Help America Vote Act, photo ID, provisional ballots, move ballots. Lots of changes took place. It's not that hard to react to change or to find the new processes under Secretary of State Johnson. We had a lot of things that we had to implement in a very short amount of time. They did not have to be rushed, and they were done with deliberate discussions and going to the stakeholders, the people who they would affect. But that, again, is gone. But it does not matter what side of the aisle you are on. I am sure we can all agree that we want every eligible voter to be able to vote freely, secretly, independently, and securely. That their vote will count. It will count once for the election. We had a lot of key reforms last time, and I will tell you that they passed the House almost with broad bipartisan support, and to me, that was good policy. However, we want to get rid of Zuckerbucks, audit the voter rolls, process for challenging and recording challenged ballots in the poll book. All these things, the bills were derived from a lot of conversation and input from the people who had lost trust in the process, people who administered elections, people who knew a lot of things about elections, and I'm very proud of that. Unfortunately, several got vetoed. We put them back in a different format, they got vetoed again, some 3 times. Some did not even get past the Senate. But it doesn't mean we stop. You know, a secure election, a secure process, a democracy republic, we hear people calling it all kinds of things. It needs checks and balances. We need to have the assurances that when we cast our ballot, we know that it's been cast properly, it's been counted once, and that the voter was eligible to vote. And what we've seen happen in just a flurry of time is all of those checks and balances removed. There is no concern for an audit of the voter roll. It starts and stops with an adequate and accurate voter roll. And there has been such resistance to just that one thing. Again, now what we see even coming into play is rules, laws, really being disparately worked on or used against. Many of you know that many of the candidates that filed for office for the 2024 election cycle have been qualified. Many of them that were disqualified were Republicans. And now the Secretary of State is hell-bent on making sure that we find out where the fraud is in these signatures. Well, I really wonder why it's so important in a petition process, but we have completely gotten rid of any signature curing for voter registration or absent voter ballots. It can't be that way. We have to return the system to the people, the checks and balances, and restore the trust. On the petition side of things, some of these changes were encouraged by the Board of Canvassers, who are the ones that certify these. They're the ones that work with it. They came forward with some changes. We saw some bills produced. Yesterday there was a committee hearing, and what happened, substitutes were offered that our members did not even see. And when the legislator, the sponsor of the legislation, went to testify, they brought along somebody from a very, very well-funded third party to talk about the changes in the substitutes that our own members of the committee had not even seen. And I don't care where I stand, but this should be a deliberative process. When I was chair, I took great pride in meeting with the stakeholders, understanding what the problem was, garnering the input, finding the solutions, and that is how we got legislation to pass with broad bipartisan support. These are not issues that are Democrats or Republican issues. This is about the people in America who want to cast their vote. We should all be fighting for the same thing. And we can do it, we can fight together, and we can make a change. But we can no longer just stand by. We have to, again, ensure that every eligible voter can vote freely, secretly, independently, and securely. In my opinion, it starts 2 things. The 2 most important things are we need an audit of the voter roll, and we need to properly fund our elections. This is a fundamental responsibility of government, in my opinion, and we should be funding it. That will cut out the third party, the targeting of voters, the targeting of communities, the lapse because the clerks are challenged. I was in a community, I know what it's like to be challenged. Everything's time sensitive and it's important. But it is not a race. It is most important when you are counting the votes and administering an election, you are preparing for a recount. Because you want the assurance that if a candidate comes forward, they want to be sure that their vote's cast and it was a clean election. And when we get rid of all those safeguards, we've abandoned anything, any confidence that we might have in our elections. So I continue to stand by you and fight for you, appreciate you being here. And again, you know, we just got to keep one foot in front of the other, keep looking ahead, do what we can.
Thank you, Ann, and now we'll bring up Representative DeBoyer, who also has county clerk experience and is on elections committee.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for taking the time to find your way here and continue to fight this issue that frankly is a gigantic issue. I spent 12 years as county clerk administering elections. I sat on the elections committee with Rochelle, and we have a lot of fun battling these guys, although at the end it's not fun when they vote us down and we're not able to prevail. But we really do have a great team of people here that are supporting this on the Republican side. Unfortunately, both in the House and in the Senate, we're in the minority. and they really don't care what we have to say. Again, as already mentioned, over 30 years of experience in administration here. So fortunately, I was the county clerk in St. Clair County in 2020. In October of 2020, I put out a statement, and I said that the behaviors and the actions of the Secretary of State, in my opinion at that time, now remember, this is before the 2020 election, were outside of the bounds and they are violations of election law. People didn't really follow that too well. They didn't understand it. People don't understand election law. But I made some obvious observations. So how did we get here? How did we land where we are right now? Well, here's a couple of the great examples. In 2020, Secretary Benson sent out unsolicited absentee ballot applications to registered voters in the state of Michigan, which was a total violation of state and federal election law. In 2020, she sent a memo to local clerks instructing them to assume that signatures were valid if there were any concern for their validity. I instructed my local clerks to disregard the memo, follow the law, abide by their oath, and do the duty that they're supposed to do. Additionally, in 2020, the Court of Claims dealt Secretary of State Benson another blow when they struck down her attempt to ban open carry of firearms at polling places, and she appealed that to the Court of Appeals, in which it was upheld, and it was indeed struck down. Again, Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson. The Michigan Court of Appeals ruled in October of 23 that Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson exceeded her authority when she put new restrictions in place governing poll challengers. The third time Michigan courts had rebuffed Benson for creating new election rules and new election laws that she did not have the authority to do. So very clearly, as you can see, that there's been a clear and deliberate course of action by Secretary Benson's administration to blatantly disregard law and believe that her office has legislative authority, which she does not have. We already spoke to the point that the legislature determines time, place, and manner by which elections occur. However, she believed that she had the authority to make these rulings. So what was Jocelyn Benson's response, right? Her and her partners in manipulation of elections, what they just did is they went out and they passed new laws, introduced new laws that would embolden and uphold the process of the election violations that she had done previously. What have they done? They've eliminated the postmark date verification on ballot returns. They've eliminated challenged ballots. They've watered down the signature verification. They remove authority for the Board of Canvassers to investigate fraud. There's a bill proposed right now to provide driver's licenses for illegals. We all know where that's going to go, right? They accept absentee ballots potentially without a postmark up to 6 days after an election. Wouldn't that be great to know how many votes you needed? So, pretty simply, I've said this to Rochelle in committee at times, if it walks like a duck, and it looks like a duck, and it sounds like a duck, it's generally probably a duck, right? So, we've currently, what's going on in Michigan is a concerted effort by the Democrat Party to stack the deck in their favor in elections. That's what's really going on. Manipulation, institution of law that is going to stack the deck and create a burden for us to win elections, have fair elections, have outcomes that are appropriate according to the will of the voters, right? What can you do? I'm going to tell you what you can do, and this is my number one priority right now. My number one priority is Republicans taking back control of the House this fall. We are not going to be able to repeal, but we are going to be able to stop. And so when you go back to your communities, remember that is the number one priority currently, is for Republicans to take back a majority this fall so we can stop the craziness. I appreciate you guys being here. I appreciate you guys having our back. We wouldn't be able to do what we do without you guys. So continue to support not only us, but your local officials that are indeed in line with us. So have a great afternoon.
Okay, next we have Patrice Johnson, who is going to come up and talk about her organization, Pure Integrity Michigan Elections. Also a Pennsylvania case she has some information on.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate it. So I brought some mints in case I can't talk loud enough. I have a bit of a cold going on. So I would just like to add to some of the things that folks have been saying. And when Senator Johnson said, well, I'll back up a little bit. I'm Patrice. I wasn't involved in politics until after the 2020 election. Some of us were sitting around our kitchen table, and we said, well, this has gone too far. We have to get involved. And somebody else said, well, if we're going to get involved, it better be in the elections because that's the only way we have a voice. So since then, we've been contacting people and learning about elections, and now we're 3 years old with 5,000 followers or more. And I'm very pleased to have several of our Michigan Fair Elections and Pure Integrity Michigan Elections supporters here too. So you ought to stand up.
Yeah, stand up.
Stand up. I want to thank Dave Coleman too. The Great Lakes Justice Center has been wonderful to work with and has done remarkable work. What I get back to, and what we tend to forget about as a country, is our founding fathers came to this nation, and their number one concern was that King George was dominating. He was abusing his power, and he had the gall to implement a tax which was 1%, which you can imagine how horrible that would be to pay 1% to taxes. So, like frogs being boiled in hot water, we've seen the branches vie for power. And our founders set up the Constitution to prevent another King George. That's why they have checks and balances. That's why the legislature in the Constitution was specifically articulated to determine the time, place, and manner of elections. They didn't say that about other things. They separated out who can elect people, who can determine election law. Those are the election laws are to be set by the legislature, the elected legislature at a local level, and then the people are to vote and elect their representatives. We are not a democracy. We are a republic where we elect representatives. And that's why it's so key that our elections be fair and honest, because those representatives here today, which I'm thrilled to know everyone here, mostly I think, are here because they're honestly driven to represent the people. And they can't do it when the elections aren't fair. So after Proposal 3 in 2018 passed, that was disheartening, same-day voter registration, things like that. But then 2022 came along with Proposition 2, and that stripped away, as other folks have talked about today, stripped away voter ID and put these things into the Constitution. And so afterwards, we started having meetings with some of the legislators. Jonathan Lindsay was one of the great minds working with us. And we were poking around to figure out what constitutionally was going on. What could we do to save election integrity? Well, we didn't have to read very far in the Constitution because it's Article 1, not Article 20, and it's Clause 4 of the Elections Clause, which says legislators are to determine the time, place, and manner of elections. Then the Moore v. Harper case came, and people, I think it was deliberately misconstrued by the press, saying, okay, so really legislatures don't have to determine time, place, and manner of elections anymore. They can be appointed bodies, judges can do it. So anyway, since then, you had the abuse of power really where in Michigan, we had election law being changed by voter ballot without any input from the legislature. So there are processes in our Constitution which say how you can use the legislature, you can go through the legislature and still have ballot initiatives that will change things. But you cannot do that with election law. You have to at least involve the legislature. They were completely bypassed. So we basically worked with folks here, 11 legislators stepped forward. And really, when you think about it, every legislator should have stepped forward, no matter what party. Because what it was saying was that the legislature has the authority, the right, the duty to determine election law. Not in isolation, because there are checks and balances in place where the court systems can say that's unconstitutional, and the executive branch can say, well, I'm going to veto it, I'm not going to sign that. So there are checks and balances in place. But in this case, there were no checks and balances because the legislature was completely usurped. Their rights were usurped. So, working with the Great Lakes Justice Center and with Eric Cardall, we filed a lawsuit in the federal courts in Michigan in the Sixth Circuit Court. Well, as you talked about earlier, the judge basically threw it out saying legislators don't have standing, which is very interesting because I'd also like to mention that what we're seeing happening in Michigan is not isolated to Michigan. It's happening all across the country, and especially in the swing states. Voter ID is being destroyed. Same-day registration, taking away the identity so that you don't have to even be a citizen to vote. This is happening everywhere where they can get away with it because, as you're saying, there's one party or one rule is hoping to gain absolute authority and become a one-party system. We weren't designed to be a one-party system. We're designed to be a two-party system. So anyway, in Pennsylvania, a similar case was filed because in that case, the legislature had turned down specific ballot initiatives had turned down specific things regarding election law. Well, the governor twice had been trying to push it through and the legislature would not pass it. So when the legislature refused, the governor just by fiat said, okay, this is how we're going to run our elections now. You don't have to have ID and some other changes. So the legislators got together and filed a suit in Pennsylvania. And while they were thinking about it, they said, well, you know what? The Biden Executive Order 14019 usurped election law too. They're taking government agencies, select government agencies, with select populations, using our taxpayer dollars to fund voter registration of these select groups. So they filed a similar federal suit in the Third Circuit Court. Well, that circuit court also said legislators don't have standing. So then what the process has been is both sets of the Michigan legislators and the Pennsylvania legislators are willing to keep fighting this until we get to the Supreme Court. In Pennsylvania, they filed, I think it's due June 28th is when their actual case has to be in. Our case has to be into our circuit court by July 1st. So they're running very much in parallel. And we're dealing with ballot initiatives, whereas they're dealing with the Executive Order 14019 and executive branch overreach, both at the state level and at the federal level. So eventually, this will end up at the Supreme Court because thankfully, in Michigan, when you appeal things through the state courts, you get to the Supreme Court, and that's this Help America Vote Act. Their administrative procedures. You can appeal up as far as the Michigan Supreme Court, and then it can't go any further. So there's a dead end for us there. But when you go through the federal courts, there isn't a dead end. The dead end is the U.S. Supreme Court. And then what we're doing now is we're engaging the Supreme Court and trying to convince them of the importance of taking the Pennsylvania case. We didn't have anything to do with the Pennsylvania case, But we did file what's called an amicus curiae. It's a friendly brief saying, yes, we think these Pennsylvania legislators have a good point and we want to support them. And the main point that we make is there are clear separations of power. There's the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch. They all were set up to check each other. And what has happened at the federal level is that one branch has usurped the authorities of the other branches. And if it were a president, the president would have standing. And if it were a judge would have standing. But they're trying to say that since these individual legislators are part of a larger body, they don't have standing. Well, that I believe that we will prevail. Because, for example, if you take a militia, let's not go there. Individual members comprise a body. You cannot have a body without its members. And this is why legislators, I believe, will have standing, they deserve standing, and that's what we're fighting for. So I think I went on a little bit, Jim. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Patrice. We had a little change in the schedule. A couple of people had issues that arose and couldn't be here, but we had some great individuals willing to stand in. And David Callum with the Great Lakes Justice Center is going to give us an update on the 16 alternate electors. Jim found that case. It's some good stuff. So.
Senator. Thank you, Senator. Well, good afternoon. It's a great day to be alive in America. I'll tell you. Especially after spending the last 7 days in court every day for 8 hours a day. Makes you wonder sometimes. No, I'm pleased to be here. Senator Runstead called, and we just wrapped up at 1:15 this afternoon our 7 days on the elector case, and I'll let you know a little bit what's happening there. If you don't know me, I'm Dave Coleman. I'm an attorney here in Lansing. I work with my son Stephen, and we have Coleman Legal Group. We also have Great Lakes Justice Center. Many of you might know Professor William Wagner, and we've been involved in lots of cases. We're honored to work with Patrice and Senator Lindsay and all the reps and everybody that's been involved in these cases and many other matters. We're a 501c3 legal organization, just like the ACLU, the ACLJ, any of those, ADF, all those groups. We just passed that we've filed over 50 amicus briefs in the U.S. Supreme Court as of last month in our organization. We've been around for about 12 years now. And we've handled a lot of litigation. Professor Wagner usually does most of the brief writing and that sort of thing, and then my son and I handle a lot of the litigation that goes on. I love being in court. Love to duke it out. It's a fun time. So many of you, I'm sure, are aware of the elector case. And let me just start out by saying they're not fake electors. They're not. They are the elected Republican electors. Now, what a lot of people don't understand is, under our law, there's something called the duly elected electors. How many of you had ever heard of that? Yeah, nobody, right? Because you don't follow electoral college law or any of those things, maybe a few of you. But they're still electors. You become the duly elected elector when it's determined which candidate won for president. Then that slate becomes, either the Democrat slate or the Republican slate, becomes the duly elected. But they're still electors. They're the Republican electors. They're just not the Democrat electors. Well, of course, you all know what happened back in 2020. And there was a lot of controversy over the election. And there were lawsuits pending, one of which we were involved in Wayne County. And, you know, we've always found it kind of interesting. Pretty much every lawyer that got involved in one of those election lawsuits back in 2020 has been attacked, sued, grievances filed against them with the Attorney Grievance Commission and all that sort of thing, except us. We're the only ones that haven't been. And you want to know why? Because we won part of our case. Did you even know that? In Wayne County, we won part of the case that we brought. The judge agreed with us that our clients were entitled to a recount. And the difference was, he said the Secretary of State had to do it, not the local county clerk in Wayne County. But he agreed with us on the main principle was our clients were entitled to the recount. And how many of you even knew that? And so, of course, how can they attack us and come after us when we won part of the case? They couldn't. So we're very happy to be involved in the case right now that's in federal court, and as Patrice said, it's on appeal. The elector case, as you know, they're claiming that they're fake electors, that they were trying to usurp the Democratic electors, that they were trying to replace them. That's not true. And we just had 7 days of evidence that has borne that out. And I had the investigator for the Attorney General's office under oath on the stand admitting, and I went through element after element in these so-called crimes that they're bringing against the electors, admitting that he had no evidence to prove our clients did any of those things that they're claiming in those charges. They're charging, for example, forgery. Now, most people kind of understand what forgery is, right? You make a fake document, you do a fake check, and you make up a check and you sign it and you try to pass it and get money, you know, forgery, right? Well, they're claiming because the Republican electors did a certificate of vote, that it's called, that said they're the Republican electors and here's who they would vote for, President Trump, Vice President Pence, that somehow that was false. Somehow that's a forgery. But yet, it is what it is. It's not a forged document. It is the Republican electors' certificate of votes. It's not a forgery. And one of the main things you have to prove in a forgery is that if it's a fake document, a false forged document, the defendant who you're attacking and going after has to have created the document. Makes sense, right? I mean, if you didn't make the document, how did you do a forgery, right? I mean, it's just common sense. Guess what the investigator admitted this morning on the stand? My client, I represent Hank Choate. Some of you might know Hank. He's a great man down in Jackson County, farmer down there, a really good guy. And he admitted he had no evidence that Hank Choate created the document. And in fact, through evidence we brought in during the proceedings, we were able to prove not one of the electors created the document. None of them did. So if they didn't create the document, how do you commit a forgery? The answer is self-evident, isn't it? So where it stands right now is we wrapped up our case today. There are 3 more defendants that have to have their preliminary exam held, and that'll be done probably sometime early fall, September, October. And then the judge is going to take briefs and all of that and then make a decision. We may not get a decision until December or January next year. And this is only at the district court level. And we're asking for all the charges to be thrown out. So keep in mind that they may come after you and they may attack you. And you know what? That just means you stand up and fight all the harder. That's what that means. You cannot back down. You cannot back off, because then they win. And we do it legally, we do it responsibly, we do it without burning down the Wendy's, right? But that's what we do. You don't sit back and just take it. You know, I'll just end with this. We all have a circle of influence, don't we? All of us. We have friends, we have family, we have church family, we have neighbors, work, right? We all have a circle of influence. Maybe your circle's 10 or 15 people. Maybe it's 150 people. Maybe through social media you've got 10,000 people who are following you or something. But we all have that circle, don't we? You can influence your circle, and you never know what the effects of that are going to have. How many of you remember John Quincy Adams? I'd say Senator Runstead knew him well. Right? One of our early presidents. A lot of people don't realize he ran for Congress after he served as president. He served 16 years in the House. And why did he do it? He said very clearly, because I want to fight against slavery and I want to stop it. And it's a scourge on our land and I'm going to do everything I can to fight it. And of course, back at the time, he couldn't get anything through. He couldn't get anything through Congress because the Southern Democrats stopped him, okay? And that's just history, folks. And he would get up and rail against, slavery and bills that were being introduced, lose time after time after time over 16 years. And one day, a constituent came up to him and said, Mr. President, you're in Congress, you could be retired living on your laurels. Why are you wasting your time? You're banging your head on the wall and you're losing all the time. Why do you keep doing it? Do you know what he said? He said, duty is ours, results are God's.
Yeah.
Folks, duty is ours.
Yeah.
Results are God's. And guess what happened at the end? John Quincy Adams died on the floor of the House, giving his last speech against slavery. A young congressman stood up for him in his one term, helped carry him reverently off the floor, and helped with his funeral arrangements. Guess who that young congressman was? Listening to him, Abraham Lincoln. 15 years later, he signed the Emancipation Proclamation. Folks, you never know in your circle of influence who you're influencing.
Yeah.
He lived under John Quincy Adams. He learned that. And then he had a chance to act on it, and he did it when he was back in power as president. We're in the same boat, folks. Don't give up. Keep fighting.
Speaking of keep fighting, I was reminded to mention that I think it's State Party has individuals here to sign up poll workers. We have, I don't know if they're eligible to stand up, but just make sure that, okay, in the back. Yeah, if you're interested in being a poll worker, that is also something else you can do. Our last speaker I'm going to bring up is Luke. He's going to talk about Bank the Vote.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. All right. How we doing, guys? Well, I had to write down some notes because normally my speeches are about 2 hours long. So we're going to keep this real clean and concise. So my name is Luke Malice. I am the field director for the Northeastern U.S. of Charlie Kirk's 501c4 nonprofit Turning Point Action. A lot of you are familiar with Turning Point USA. Today is their 12-year anniversary, actually, so that's crazy. But we are, we were founded actually in 2019, and with the main focus of becoming what we are today, which is an organization solely focused on going out and chasing the vote. Making sure that all those individuals, the millions, that are followers, and the, hundreds of thousands that are supporters of Turning Point USA could actually get engaged and actually do partisan work and actually get, Republicans elected. So that's what our main focus is. This year, what our main focus is, especially in Michigan, we look at, the demographics that our party is made up of. We have the faith community, and we have the hunters, and we have the moms, and the African American community, and the Latinos. So what we decided to do, we built coalitions, and that's what we're doing, is building coalitions around that and going out and chasing what we call low propensity Republicans. And I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with what that is. But the problem is, in some of these demographic groups, we have individuals, mind you, that are already registered to vote. We had 300,000 hunters that didn't vote in the last election, and are registered to vote, but they didn't vote, and they get hunting licenses every year. That's crazy. And then, the faith community in like 15 key different counties in Michigan, we had only 8% of the faith community that voted. 8%. That's staggering. So we were like, how do we go in and how do we tap into being able to get them to actually vote? So we decided was build these coalitions out, and then also to equip these individuals with the right tools and the resources to be able to be successful, to make it easy to go out and actually register them to be, now because of Proposal 2 having passed, they can be permanent absentee voters. And at the end of the day, of course, I would love it to be make it a national holiday, election day, and be able to have people vote. but that's not the world that we're living in, right? And I love hand-counted paper ballots, but that's just not the cards that we've been dealt. And if we continue to play, the cards that we've been dealt, we're going to lose. That's just the facts. So what we need to do is register these individuals who more than likely are not going to show up on election day to actually vote, to actually get them to vote via, the mail. So we have now our tools and resources, especially in Michigan specifically, like with one of our affiliate organizations, Michigan Family Forum. They've got a great tool that you can use where you can literally in real time, you can take somebody's ID. Let's say you're at a congregation at a church. You can literally take somebody's ID, you can scan their ID, and within 60 seconds, it'll auto-populate that person's information onto the SOS site. It'll submit the absentee ballot request form for you, and then on the back end, you'll get a notification that John Doe received his absentee ballot. And then after that, you can go ahead and call him, help him vote. Let's say it was in a congregation, so you'd help him, hey John, would love to be able to go over with you how to vote biblically, and go over the two different candidates and over each issue that they both line up on. And unfortunately as it is, like 99% of the time, it's going to be the Republican that they side with, and that's pretty incredible. Also with the hunters and stuff, we have people going out every weekend to gun shows and to sportsman clubs and doing this, and it's been showing great success. So that's really exciting stuff, and we want to be able to just offer to everybody. Also, we have the Turning Point Action app, which I'll be in the back of the room afterwards, but here's a little trifold. It's free to everybody. I could go on for an hour about all the stuff that's inside of it, but it's really innovative. We have, help knock doors feature on there, so wherever you're at, doesn't matter who you are, you can literally in real time, like right now if you pull out your phone, you can click on help knock doors. It'll take you to the closest 15 individuals that are, we identify as low propensity voters that you can go out and you can target and actually chase those votes. And we have surveys and questionnaires already on there and scripts. Maybe it's your first time ever door knocking. Well, right then and there, you can learn how to do it in real time. So we have phone banking feature on there, text features on there. You can even send postcards to people on there, which is pretty awesome. When we pay for all of it, it's free. We just want to win. So that's, money is not what it's about. It's about winning and saving this country, because right now, clearly, with everything that's going on, here in Lansing and just, President Trump, this banana court, this kangaroo court that they've got going on. It's crazy. So we've got a lot of people coming out onto our side. We see that overwhelmingly. I've had more people that were Democrats, reach out to me and asking me about the People's Convention coming up in Detroit after President Trump's, sham trial and stuff. They were like, hey, I'd love to be able to come see him speak and stuff. These are people that I, went to school with that were Democrats, and they literally reached out to me and want tickets and stuff. So I'm like, absolutely. So I'll just, hook them up. So with that too, we do have the People's Convention coming up, which is super exciting. I don't think there's ever been, a organization, that's had a conference this magnitude and size. It's a national one that's going to be in Detroit, Michigan, next weekend, the 14th through the 16th. If any of you would like to go, we've got obviously all the main conservative speakers going to be at that. It's going to be pretty exciting stuff. We're very excited. I am too, because Michigan, I've been really hounding them for the past couple of years. I'm like, guys, please, let's have one in Michigan or in the Midwest in general, because I promise you people will show up. It's normally always in Florida, and I always didn't understand why we'd have a summer conference in Florida, but Michigan's a great spot for it. So if you guys want to as well, I will tell you, if you want to, meet me in the back of the room, I actually have a link to a free ticket for you for the entire weekend. So I'd be happy to give that to you as well. So with that, I will keep moving. Thank you.
Well, we are at the end of our time. I was asked if there's going to be a few minutes for people to mingle, and there will be, if you have questions for any of the panelists, people who were up here speaking and dispensing a lot of great information. And one of the things we talked about as a group that we're talking about putting this together is hoping that we have some takeaways that people can get involved and make a difference. And we actually put this together literally probably 20 minutes before or less, before we came over. And the goal was that with elections, what we're finding is that there are people in all these silos working on, from whether it's lawsuits, if it's working on the voter file, if it's working on what they are doing with the recalls, and on and on and on. Everybody's working in silos, and they're not really connecting all these things. So much of it is interconnected, and there's so many good volunteers that could help them, because they're usually individuals, none of them are paid. They're all doing this gratis. They're working so hard. If they had some help, it would be a great strategy to start doing with the Democrats. You know, I tell you, they organize, they got the Soros money, so they're hiring everybody. But we have to compete the best we can. So if there's one of these areas that you have an interest in doing, if you want to fill this out and get it to Kevin in the back or Annette in the front, then we'd like to get in touch with these organizations and say, here's some people that would like to work with you. We'll try to expand that list. If you want to get, I don't know if you have your cards with the card with your some contact method. But again, this is just something we just started today, but we want to keep expanding and make it better and better. So with that, we are about out of, well, looks like we had a question back here.
I have a question. The House bills are 301, we don't want that, is that correct?
401.
401, what else?
Yeah,
601?
401, I think it's 401, 2 and 3. So 401, 402, and 403, but 401 I believe is the critical one. That is the supposedly codifying the National Voters' Rights Act, which is the Supreme Court has actually eliminated many of the provisions of that past law. But it's conflating a number of different bills, plus they're throwing in a boatload of things. It's an absolutely horrendous bill. It is designed, in my view, to get all elections run by the Secretary of State and eliminate all the local clerks. I believe that is the actual design. And the other one is...
Are these House bills? Senate bills.
There's 603 as the primary one, and 604 is a component. That one we have to attack also. The clerks are really building pressure on the Democrats. The clerks are beginning to see that this is just an attempt to run them out of the elections operation. So they are getting pushback, but that tells you that makes the difference. They make this modification to 603 and say, well, okay, we'll allow the Board of Canvassers to refer it to the Attorney General or the local prosecutor, which is a complete joke. But they're doing that because they're starting to get some pushback. The more we can get this out there, especially if independent voters know that this isn't for them, this stuff is just for the majority party. So we got to get that word out as best we can. And like I said, we're
House bill or Senate bill? 603?
Both Senate bills.
Both Senate.
So with that, and with the panelists are going to be here for a few more minutes, you can talk to them. And I would like you to give all the panelists a hand, and also yourselves for coming out. Thank you. Yeah.